The Biblical Research Institute of the General Conference wrote this: "The world church has never viewed these subjects as essential to salvation or to the mission of the remnant church. There can be no strong unity within the world church of God's remnant people so long as segments who hold these views vocalize and agitate them both in North America and in overseas divisions. These topics need to be laid aside and not urged upon our people as necessary issues." That was the advice of the highest biblical study commission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church as to why we should not deal with these subjects. And so this afternoon, just like Brother Fitch had to do 150 years ago, I'm going to share with you my reasons for respectfully declining the advice of my senior brethren on this subject, as saying that these subjects are not of value for the world church and are not necessary and should not be agitated. I am going to share with you why I think they must be. Back in the beginning, the challenge of Satan was very strong against God. He said, "God, your laws are unfair. The way you're treating the angels is unfair. And then when you created human beings, you treated them unfairly. Your government is not valid. The way you handle people is rigid and arbitrary. And your law is unsuitable for created beings." That was the original challenge. That was the original defiance. Why did Jesus Christ come into the world? Would you take your Bible for just a moment and look up John 8, verse 26. John 8, verse 26. "I have many things to say and to judge of you, but he that sent me is true, and I speak to the world those things which I have heard of him." May I suggest that the primary reason Jesus came down to this earth is to tell the truth about the character of God. He that sent me is true. I believe that was the mission of Jesus Christ. If he would have died on the cross of Calvary without substantiating that, would it have done any good for us? He that sent me is true. If he would have died as a martyr, if he would have died because of his standing up for right and for truth, and he would not have shown that God in heaven was true, he would have failed in his mission. It was not his death alone. It was his death substantiating the truth of God and his law and his character. That's what made his mission successful. He that sent me is true was the mission that Christ had to fulfill if he was to succeed in what he was sent to do. A person wrote a letter into the Adventist Review that was very perceptive. He came to the world, this was quoting Signs of the Times, January 20, 1890, quoting from Ellen White, Signs of the Times, January 20, 1890. He came to the world that the erroneous ideas Satan had been the means of creating in the minds of men in regard to the character of God might be removed. Notice that? He came to the world that Satan's lies might be revealed. That's why he came. Jesus came to teach men of the Father. When the object of his mission was attained, what was the object of his mission? The revelation of God to the world. The Son of God announced that his work was accomplished and that the character of the Father was made manifest to men. Let's be very clear on that. Jesus' mission was to clarify the character of the Father, to tell the truth about God's ways of saving mankind, God's ways of rulership. Notice that carefully. When the object of his mission was attained, the revelation of God to the world, then he announced that his work was accomplished. The only reason that it had to go through to the cross was to show fully that the character of God and the character of Satan stood in stark contrast. Only at the cross was it clearly seen that Satan was a murderer from the beginning and that God's ways were completely opposite from Satan's ways. That's why the cross was important. The object of his mission was to reveal the character of his Father. That is a very, very crucial statement on this point. Now, there are two charges Satan has made against the law of God. He said this in heaven, angels don't need the law of God. It isn't suitable for them. They can do just fine without any law. So, God's law is not right. It isn't fair. It's too restrictive. That's charge A, as I call it. Charge B, fallen human beings, after Adam's sin, cannot obey the law of God. Now, everyone pretty well agrees on charge A. Angels, unfallen man, can't obey the law of God. There's not much controversy on that point. But it's charge B that's the problem area. What did God really say? We need to review a little bit of evidence on this point because not many people understand charge B. Listen carefully to Signs of the Times, Volume 3, page 264. No, that's the one. Satan declared that it was impossible for the sons and daughters of Adam to keep the law of God. Who's the son and daughter of Adam? Cain, Abel, and the rest of us. All right? Are those people with fallen or unfallen natures? See how easy that one is? Satan declared that it was impossible for the sons and daughters of Adam to keep the law of God, and thus charged upon God a lack of wisdom and love. If you cannot keep the law of God, then there was fault with the lawgiver. That's charge B. If human beings, after the fall of Adam, cannot keep the law of God, then the lawgiver is at fault. All right? Let's try another one. Review and Herald. It's volume 5 of the bound volumes, page 120. He came to this world to be tempted in all points as we are, to prove to the universe that in this world of sin, human beings can live lives that God will approve. Why did Christ come to this world? To prove to the universe that in this world of sin, that's people with fallen natures, human beings can live lives that God will approve. Satan declared that human beings could not live without sin. So Satan says fallen human beings, after the fall of Adam, cannot live without sinning. God says they can. The law is good. Satan says the law is bad. Satan says human beings in this world of sin cannot keep the law of God. My Life Today, page 323. In relationship to all the fallen sons and daughters of Adam, revealing to the heavenly universe, to Satan, and to all the fallen sons and daughters of Adam, that through his grace, humanity can keep the law of God. Who's he revealing it to? Satan, all the heavenly universe, and all the fallen sons and daughters of Adam, that through his grace, what humanity? Fallen humanity can keep the law of God. So there are 3 statements, and there are quite a few more. Let's try this one. After the fall of man, Satan declared that human beings were proved to be incapable of keeping the law of God. After the fall of man, incapable of keeping the law of God. Selected Messages, Volume 1, 252 and 253. Christ's humanity would demonstrate for eternal ages the question which settled the controversy. How was the controversy settled? That's the issue. How was the great controversy settled? In taking upon himself man's nature in its fallen condition, Christ did not in the least participate in its sin. How did he settle it? He took man's nature in its fallen condition, but didn't participate in its sin. That's Selected Messages, Volume 1, 255 and 256. So we have a few statements here that are quite clear. After the fall, the sons and daughters of Adam cannot keep the law of God. After they have sinned, Satan says, they cannot obey God. Obedience is impossible. And of course, that's what the whole Christian world has been saying. Christians can't keep the law. The law is infinite. It's holy. It can't be kept by finite sinning human beings. It can only be kept when we have a perfect nature, since it is infinitely perfect. And so at this point we have charge B, leveled against the character of God. Fallen humanity cannot keep the law of God. How is God going to answer that charge? How is God going to prove that Satan is lying on this? Only by standing at the head of humanity as the second Adam can Jesus Christ prove that Satan was a liar. But now, you see, there's a difference. The first Adam had a perfect nature which had no bias at all toward evil. The second Adam, what must he come like to prove Satan a liar? If he came like Adam in the Garden of Eden, he would have disproved Satan's argument on charge A. Angels, unfallen human beings, can obey the law of God. He would have proved it. Charge A would have been done. But what about charge B? Fallen human beings cannot obey the law of God. If Jesus would have come in Adam's perfect nature, who then would have proved Satan wrong on charge B? How about you? How about me? Would any of us have been the proof that Satan was a liar? Or would we all have substantiated Satan's claim? Remember, the claim is, fallen human beings cannot obey the law of God. How many of us have disobeyed the law of God? All of us have proved Satan right in the great controversy, haven't we? Even Enoch. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All have had to been forgiven by the blood of Christ. That's the only way of entrance into the kingdom of heaven. Not one human being has gone from birth to death in this earth without sinning. Therefore, if Jesus truly came in the nature of Adam before the fall, then who to this day has proved that Satan is lying when he said, fallen men and women cannot obey the law of God? My friends, that charge would stand substantiated to this day. We would be no closer to the end of the great controversy than we were before the death of Christ. There would be no way to prove that Satan was a liar in the great controversy. And we would not be in any way in expecting that Jesus could come any time in the near future, because Satan would not have been proved wrong. You see, there are two charges in this attack against God's law: the unfallen charge and the fallen charge. Those in Christianity who say Christ took Adam's nature say that Christ disproved the first charge. Those who say that Christ took our nature disprove the second charge, which includes the first charge as well. Because certainly if fallen man can obey the law of God, unfallen man could easily obey the law of God and can obey the law of God throughout all eternity. So you see, we're dealing with two different charges here. If Christ had sidestepped our fallen human nature, we would be no closer toward a resolution of the great controversy than before the death of Christ. Then we would not have a sinless substitute to stand in our place, because only could Christ stand as our substitute if he successfully proved Satan was a liar. Remember the text we read, both from the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy? He came to prove that God was true. He came to prove that God's way worked. That had to be done before his death had any meaning. And if he had sidestepped our nature, or if he had only taken part of our nature, which is the common teaching today, he took our physical weaknesses, but not our tendencies and our inclinations, then he would have shown that anyone with only physical limitations could have obeyed the law of God. But who's like that today? There is no one of us who has only physical limitations, but not sinful tendencies to temper, etc., going along with those physical limitations. So any understanding of the nature of Christ that stops short of Christ taking our full-orbed humanity in its fallenness leaves Satan in charge of the great controversy to this day, with no one proving him wrong. And thus, we do not have an answer to Satan's charges, and the great controversy is not close to being done. In the most simple way that I can say it, that's why I believe that Jesus had to take our fallen nature, is because I want a substitute.